Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world. One quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Tuesday, 15th July, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China's economic growth in the second quarter has exceeded forecasts, but deflation fears linger, prompting calls for economic stimulus and deeper reforms. The country's GDP growth was 5.1%, surpassing estimates, but still represents a deceleration from the 5.4% growth in the first quarter. Iron ore prices initially increased due to improved sentiment regarding China's economy and Rio Tinto Group's accelerated timeline for shipments, but then fell following data showing a decline in China's crude steel output linked to struggles in the property sector. In response, Alibaba Group Holding is launching a Super Saturdays program to attract consumers amid an intensifying price war. China is also rapidly developing its artificial intelligence sector, with local governments supporting AI startups to compete with U.S. companies. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang has praised China's AI models as Nvidia resumes chip exports to the country, and the U.S. Commerce Department has permitted AMD to resume reviewing license applications for its Mi-308 products destined for China. Baidu plans to expand its driverless car business globally in partnership with Uber. A national cyber ID system has been officially introduced, raising privacy and censorship concerns. On the international stage, President Xi Jinping has reiterated China's support for globalization and opposition to unilateral sanctions. China and Australia have engaged in discussions about free trade and increased dialogue. The EU-China summit was moved to Beijing and shortened to one day, underscoring the EU's efforts to address China's trade practices amid a significant trade deficit. Elsewhere in China, Innovent Biologics, the first Chinese company approved to sell a GLP-1 drug for weight loss and diabetes, is partnering with JD Health to distribute its product. The Chinese smartphone market experienced a decline in Q2 after 6 quarters of growth. Turning to Hong Kong, the stock market has surged following China's GDP growth exceeding expectation. Mainland China heavyweights are contributing to Hong Kong's position as a top IPO destination. In the United States, the Commerce Department has told AMD that it will resume reviewing license applications required to send its Mi-308 products to China. Commerce Secretary Latnik says China is only getting Nvidia's 4th best AI chip. Finally, the European Union summit with China was moved from Brussels to Beijing and reduced to one day, highlighting the EU's struggle to curb China's unfair trade practices amid a €400 billion trade deficit. The EU seems determined to adopt a firm stance in its relationship with China. United States. The U.S. stock market showed a split performance, with the Nasdaq reaching an all-time high thanks to Nvidia's gains after the approval to sell advanced H20 computer chips to China, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average declined amid concerns about earnings and inflation, and the S&P 500 had mixed results. This occurred as US inflation data and bank earnings reports were released. Core CPI data indicated easing inflation in June, but worries about tariffs remained. The U.S. Trade Representative initiated an investigation into Brazil's trading practices. Banking regulators also published guidelines for banks holding crypto assets. Nvidia's CEO, Jensen Huang, expressed concern about the departure of Chinese academics and researchers from the U.S., calling it a great loss. The U.S. has launched investigations into imports of drones and polysilicon from China, potentially leading to tariffs. The FTSE 100 in London briefly breached 9,000 points amidst rising US inflation, which was reported at 2.7%. China. Nvidia received approval from the Trump administration to sell its advanced H20 computer chips used for artificial intelligence to China. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority, HKMA, intervened in the foreign exchange market for the sixth time since late June to stabilize the local currency. Due to interest rate differentials with the US dollar, Hong Kong shares of dual-listed Chinese companies are trading at their smallest discount to onshore peers in almost 5 years, driven by a weaker US dollar and mainland investors. Unitary Robotics CEO highlighted the global interest in China's humanoid robots and the potential for collaboration with American companies. Russia. Trump has issued a 50-day ultimatum to Russia regarding the war in Ukraine, which has been met with varied reactions. The Kremlin stated that Trump's statements regarding Russia and Putin are serious and require analysis, while some Russian officials and media outlets dismissed the ultimatum. Russia stated, "It is open to talks with Ukraine, but needs time to analyze Trump's proposal." The Russian ruble and stock market experienced gains following Trump's statement. Kazakhstan is proceeding with power plant construction independently due to financing delays faced by Russia, signaling a potential shift in regional partnership. A U.S. citizen who aided Russia from within Ukraine has been granted Russian citizenship by Putin, highlighting ongoing geopolitical tensions. There were reports that Trump asked Zelensky to strike deep inside Russia, but the White House denied this. Europe. Concerns have arisen in Europe regarding potential U.S. tariffs, with some fearing tariffs as high as 30%. European companies are urging calm as the bloc attempts to avert these tariffs, focusing on US-EU trade deals. Brazil. The United States Trade Representative has launched an investigation into Brazil's unfair trading practices. Canada. The TAIEX retreated from its record high as US bank earnings weighed on financials. TEX futures edged up ahead of key domestic and US inflation data. Global markets. Gold prices rose in the domestic futures market due to positive global trends and a weaker US dollar. Emerging economies are reportedly less vulnerable to US monetary policy than in the past, suggesting a shift in global economic dynamics. India's stock indices began on a slightly negative note, influenced by inflation data and investor caution. Despite this initial dip, the equity benchmarks later rose, spurred by soft inflation data that bolstered hopes for a Reserve Bank of India (RBI) rate cut, though its stocks placed downward pressure. Several stock recommendations have been made by analysts. Sagar Doshi suggests Voltas, Samvartana Motherson, and JK Tyre, while Sumit Bagadia recommends Haramba Industries, Diamond Power Infrastructure, Vintage Coffee and Beverages, Sami Hotels, and PTC India. In corporate news, Coal India will consider an interim dividend and its Q1 FY26 results on July 31. Anthem Biosciences' $395 million IPO was fully subscribed. India's Travel Food Services opened lower on its debut, with a valuation of $1.67 billion. Plastilins India reported a 17.7% drop in Q1 net profit, with revenue declining by over 5%. Rallis India saw its stock price surge, hitting a record high as Q1 net profit nearly doubled. Tesla launched its Model Y in India, priced at $70,000, positioning it to compete in the premium segment against brands like BMW. India's GDP growth is projected to be between 6.30% and 6.5% for the fiscal year 2024-25. The National Stock Exchange, NSE, facilitated 268 IPOs, raising $19.50 billion. Jane Street, a quant trading firm, faces regulatory challenges and scrutiny. DPS, described as India's financial GPS, tracked yield 50,000 crore in stock market scam. Multiple bomb threats were reported across India, including at the Bombay Stock Exchange. BSE. The BSE received a threat from someone claiming to be Comrade Pinarayi Vijayan, who stated that there were 4 RDXIEs in the building. These threats were determined to be hoaxes. Union Minister Prahlad Joshi stated that India is aligning with global energy trends. Trade relations between India and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, are facing challenges due to rising tariffs. The situation is further complicated by trade dynamics involving the United States, as suggested by Trump's statement about seeking access into India, similar to ongoing efforts with Indonesia. Japan's stock market has shown mixed results, with the Nikkei 225 sometimes rising, like the 0.53% increase seen recently, and other times slightly decreasing due to election uncertainties and tariff worries affecting chip-related stocks. The Topix index also experienced a slight dip of 0.11% on one such occasion. Despite tariff concerns, manufacturer sentiment in Japan showed improvement in July. NFG reported record annual profits and anticipates further growth, even with the tariff implications. The bond market in Japan has been unstable, as evidenced by a bond rout spurred by election jitters, causing the 10-year yield to climb. Politically, Japan's ruling coalition is predicted to lose its majority in the upper house, according to recent surveys. Prime Minister Ishiba is set to meet with U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent. Ahead of the upper house elections, foreign regulation has emerged as a key issue. In corporate news, Nissan is closing its Apama plant to cut costs and move production to a facility in southwestern Japan. Nidec is constructing an EV motor in China to aid Toyota in competing with rivals. Japan Cash Machine Company Limited has announced the disposal of treasury shares for executive incentives. Nomura has listed a new U.S. Treasury ETF in Japan. Fidelity has become the largest shareholder in Metaplanet, a Japanese Bitcoin treasury company. Natixis, a French investment bank, is expanding its presence in Japan. World shares are generally up in Europe, echoing gains seen across many Asian markets, but anxiety persists over President Trump's latest tariffs. In Asia, markets displayed mixed results, influenced by Nvidia's performance on the Nasdaq and wider apprehension about US stocks. Asian investors have been strategically decreasing their investments in US equities, a move propelled by a weaker dollar. Specifically, the percentage of US assets in Asia's securities portfolios fell by 0.7 percentage points, settling at 40.8% during the first quarter of 2025. Market sentiment is also sensitive to speculation surrounding a potential Federal Reserve rate cut, with diminishing expectations factoring into trading decisions. The United States remains central to global economic discussions as President Trump's revised tariffs continue to fuel market unease, especially in Asia. A softening dollar has led Asian investors to reduce their allocations to US equities, even though attractive alternatives are limited. Across Asia, investors are carefully managing market volatility resulting from US trade policies and currency fluctuations. Taiwan Stock Exchange and KPMG are jointly engaging with Southeast Asian companies, promoting IPO opportunities in Singapore. Saudi Arabia's economy shows both growth and challenges. The nation successfully issued $1.34 billion in Sukuk in July and is the top recipient of venture capital in the MENA region, with $860 invested in the first half of 2025, surpassing its 2024 total. GTRA residents now have easier access to Saudi stock market investments, and the kingdom leads in regional sustainable bond markets. In contrast, the Tadawul All-Share Index experienced a 1.05% decline, closing at 11,095, and annual inflation rose to 2.3% in June. Expanding on key projects, Baraya Extended Care obtained $124 million for its growth. Diriyah awarded Salini Saudi Arabia a $600 million contract for retail development. Al Baida Group has partnered with Elm Company. The Saudi government is also reassessing the ambitious The Line project. Adding to these events, Saudi Arabia adjusted its data reporting to comply with its OPEC quota in June. A comprehensive guide to the Saudi Arabia skilled worker visa process was also released in July 2025. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is addressing concerns with China's President Xi Jinping regarding a Chinese naval live-fire exercise near Australia. Albanese aims for a calm and consistent approach to Australia-China relations. Australian stocks experienced mixed performance, initially reaching record highs due to banking and tech sector gains. Concerns over CPI data and potential tariffs caused a dip, but investors largely dismissed tariff fears, resulting in another record close. Consumer sentiment also boosted the market. Australia is introducing a mandatory merger control regime. High-risk capital will acquire Reef Casino Trust for $116 million. Project Acacia is advancing to its next testing phase. Australian Oilseeds is expanding into Vietnam via a strategic partnership. The Australian and New Zealand dollars are supported by yen weakness. Indonesia may soon see changes to its trade relationship with the United States, as U.S. President Donald Trump announced a preliminary trade agreement. This agreement reportedly involves a 19% tariff. Trump also stated Indonesia committed to purchasing 50 Boeing jets. The deal, according to Trump, followed talks with Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. Jakarta has not yet confirmed the agreement. The announcement has seemingly impacted Asia-Pacific markets, leading to a decline. European stock markets navigated a turbulent session, swayed by U.S. inflation figures, tariff prospects, and U.S.-EU trade discussions. Initial forecasts anticipated a sluggish market debut, attributed to growth anxieties exacerbated by U.S. inflation reports and tariff impositions proposed by former President Trump. Subsequently, optimism grew as U.S. and EU trade negotiations fostered hope, nudging shares upward. Ultimately, markets concluded on a downturn, primarily due to Trump's tariff threats, with healthcare and financial sectors bearing the brunt. In corporate developments, Renault named Duncan Minto as interim CEO. Separately, the CEO of the SIX Stock Exchange conveyed a positive outlook, characterizing the prevailing conditions as a golden opportunity for European equities. South Africa grapples with economic headwinds, including tariffs, data governance, and national debt. These challenges will likely feature in upcoming G20 finance discussions. The South African rand saw a positive surge, fueled by promising mining data from within the country and favorable inflation reports from the United States. Turning to infrastructure and social issues. South African metros will divide $17 billion in fuel levy revenue, although this allocation faces legal hurdles. A critical housing shortage continues to affect low-income families, prompting calls for government action. Adding to the complexities, sections of Johannesburg's botanical gardens are reportedly being considered for sale. Further unrest is seen as Uber drivers in Johannesburg staged a shutdown, protesting against ongoing fare disagreements. Looking at specific sectors, a market analysis forecasts growth in South Africa's dental equipment market from 2018 through 2018. Through 2034, offering insights into future trends and projection. Canada's markets responded to new inflation figures, with the S&P TX composite closing down 0.53%. The country's inflation rate for June reached 1.9%, reducing the likelihood of a rate cut by the Bank of Canada in July. In corporate news, Go Residential, a New York-based luxury rental REIT, is initiating an IPO in Canada, while Motley Fool Canada has identified key stocks for investors to monitor. Adding to the financial developments, Islamic fintech firm Naval is extending its Halal Finance hub from Canada into the US, and Canadian company Aura Minerals is aiming to secure over $196 million through a US IPO. The European Union is bracing for potential trade friction with the United States. Oil officials have voiced concerns about a big gap in trade relations, pointing to increased tariff threats from the US directed at the EU, Canada, and Mexico. Across the border in the United States, the financial sector is seeing international activity. The Islamic fintech company Naval is expanding its halal finance hub from its base in Canada to serve the U.S. market. Furthermore, Aura Minerals, a company originating from Canada, is planning a U.S. EPO with the goal of raising in excess of $196 million. France faces potential budget challenges due to its high debt load, a concern for investors and credit rating agencies. To address this, the government has proposed cutting 2 public holidays, aiming to avert a budget crisis. France possesses one of the strongest military sectors in Europe, positioning it to potentially play a decisive role in fostering autonomy within the continent's defense sector. Shifting focus to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is grappling with rising inflation rates, impacting the cost of living for many citizens. The central bank is under pressure to implement measures to curb inflation, potentially through interest rate hikes. Recent polls indicate a decline in public approval for the Liberal government, reflecting growing economic anxieties. Meanwhile, in Australia, the government is pushing forward with ambitious renewable energy projects to reduce carbon emission. The transition to green energy is projected to create new jobs in the manufacturing and technology sector. Australia is also strengthening its trade ties with Asian nations to diversify its export market. Pakistan has secured a $513 million Murabaha financing agreement with the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, ITFC. The syndicated deal will facilitate Pakistan's energy imports. Turning to Hong Kong, an analysis by ULP examines the city's cryptocurrency regulations. The piece questions whether the regulatory approach is overly conservative. It also speculates on Hong Kong's potential to emulate Singapore's success in the crypto industry. Meanwhile, in Italy, a government minister has expressed concerns about an upcoming concert. The concert features a conductor known for his pro-Putin stance. The minister fears Russia could exploit the event for propaganda purposes. Bahrain is promoting its Golden Residency 2025 program through Loom, Pakistan. The program is positioned as a flexible and affordable alternative to traditional Gulf visas. In the United States, former President Trump has raised the possibility of a linguistic shift. He suggested that America might eventually adopt the term football instead of soccer for the globally recognized sport. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.